أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. اللهم افتح علينا حكمتك وانشر علينا رحمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. وصلي اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الكرام. ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. We ended on 59, and then he said, when umiru bil-lawhi wal-qalami wa bi-jami'i ma fihi qad ruqim. We believe in the pen and the tablet and in all that was inscribed. And the qalam and the lawh, the Prophet ﷺ said that the first thing that was created was the pen, and then the lawh, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told the pen to write uktub, and then the pen asked what to write, and he said write what was, is, and will be, which is on the lawh al-mahfuz. And the lawh, Ibn Abbas said that the scribes that record everything that you do, that it's compared with what's in the lawh also, and they match perfectly. So the actions and all those things, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His aforeknowledge knows. And yet despite that, on the Yawm al-Qiyamah, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes people to account, He does not judge in accordance with His knowledge, even though His knowledge is absolute. And there's a ruling in fiqh, al-qadi la yaqdi bi'ilmihi, that a judge does not judge according to his knowledge. It's not permitted in Islamic law for a judge. I mean, there's a khilaf in some circumstances, but the general principle is that a judge cannot, for instance, if you're a judge and you're walking to the courthouse and you see a man kill another man, so you're a witness, you cannot be the judge in that trial of that man. You can be a witness, but you can't be the judge, because a judge can't judge with his knowledge. Al-qadi la yaqdi bi'ilmihi. And so one of the reasons for that is because in a court of justice, you want a fair trial. So if the qadi is, you go before the qadi and he already knows that you're guilty, so there's not really a trial, is there? If the qadi knows you're guilty and he's going to judge against you, but to have an impartial judge to sit and listen to the evidence, that's a fair trial. So nobody who's in a situation like that can claim that he was dealt with unjustly. You can't say it wasn't fair. I went to the court and the judge already presumed my guilt, because there's a presumption of innocence, right? Until somebody's proven guilty, bara'at al-asliyah. So one of the reasons why that is true in the world, because in the next world, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not judge with His knowledge, even though His knowledge is absolute. He brings witnesses. He has your hands testify, your feet testify, your tongue testifies, your eyes testify. Kafa bi nafsika al-yawma shahida. You know, it's enough. Suffice yourself as a witness today. And then you're asked, have you been wronged? Khalas. So even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even though His knowledge is absolute, and He can say, you stand condemned, go to hell. Allah could do that. And He would be just in doing that. But He set up a court of justice. Everybody will have their day in that court. The lawh al-mahfuz, you know how you have the stenographers taking everything down? That's the kiram al-katibin. The noble scribes, the angels. And even it's because the ard, it says tu'radu, like the Prophet said, tu'radu alayya a'malu ummati. The ard is that you actually seeing them, which is even worse. So the lawh and the qalam are those two things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has done. Now that's one of the reasons tabarrukan that historically Muslims have always maintained the tradition of the lawh in learning the Quran, and even in some places they still learn all the knowledges that way. They write on a lawh. In this tradition, in our culture here in the U.S., they used to, even up until the mid-20th century, they still had slates where they would write on the slate, a learning slate, which is basically a lawh. And the children would learn their lesson, memorize it. Now, one of the things, because the hadith says that the first thing that was created was the pen, some of the ulama argue that means the very first thing. But some of the commentators say, and there's a note about this, that there are things that precede the pen. And so Imam al-Ajluni said that it's actually min naw'ihi. The first thing, أول ما خلقه الله سبحانه وتعالى القلم أي من نوع القلم. And this is like, in Western tradition they have the archetypes. So you have the archetypes. What in Islamic traditions, one of the Andalusian scholars called it al-a'yan al-thabita, the source forms that everything comes from. So the first pen is the qalam, from pens. The first lawh is the lawh, but the actual very first thing that was created. And again, I mentioned this yesterday. It's not part of aqidah because the ahadith are not mutawatira, but the most of the ulama of our tradition accepted those riwayat about the light of the Prophet ﷺ with. So it should never be a debate. That's not a situation to debate or argue with people. Just leave it. But that is what most of our scholars in this tradition have argued. Wallahu alam. And then he says that فَلَوْ اسْتَمَعَ الْخَلْقُ كُلُّهُمْ عَلَى شَيْءٍ كتبه الله تعالى فيه أنه كائن ليجعلوه غير كائن لم يقدروا عليه ولو اجتمعوا كلهم على شيء كتبه الله تعالى فيه أنه غير كائن ليجعلوه كائنا لم يقدروا عليه جف القلم بما هو كائن إلى يوم القيامة. So he says, and this is following his section on the qadr, so it relates to that. Hence, if everyone united to remove from existence what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had decreed would exist, they could not. Likewise, if they all united to introduce something into existence that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not decree, they would be unable to do so. ضعف الطالب والمطلوب. They can't, لن يخلقوا ذبابة, they can't create a fly. Nothing that Allah does not will to be will not be. So anything that people do, even from the miracles of modern technology, even if they could clone, even if they could do istinsakh. I mean, biological life is not spiritual life. So we don't believe that biological life is spiritual life, because the Prophet ﷺ told us that is at 120 days the ruh comes in to the janeen, to the fetus. We know that there's biological life that precedes that. It's dependent on the mother. But once you get a mitotic cell division, biological life starts. So spiritual life and biological life are not the same thing. So the spiritual basis for existence is outside of the material existence. It's outside of it. And that's why no matter what they do, they will not be able to create consciousness. They can create, they can even if they could do something with all this istinsakh, this knowledge of cloning and things like that. They can't create consciousness unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala willed it. So even if that happened, it would be Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that put the ruh into something, not humans. They cannot create consciousness. And everything they do is only a manipulation of materials that already exist, that Allah created. We can't bring anything from nothing. We can't do that. Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can do that. And so they cannot, nothing that they, if Allah did not decree it to come into the world, it won't be in the world. And then he said the pen's work is done. Khalas. The ink is dry. And until the Yawm al-Qiyamah. And then he says, وَمَا أَخْطَأَ الْعَبْدَ لَمْ يَكُنْ لِيُصِيبَهُ. Whatever misses a person could not have afflicted him. And this is لِكَيْ لَا تَأْسَوْا عَلَى مَا فَاتَكُمْ وَلَا تَفْرَحُوا بِمَا أَتَاكُمْ. This is in order that you don't get so happy with what comes to you and you don't get grieved about what you don't get. That the mu'min's state is a balanced state because he knows or she knows that what happens to them is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If something afflicts them, إِذَا أَصَابَتْهُمْ مُصِيبَةٌ قَالُوا إِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. Something afflicts them, we belong to God and to Him we return. If something misses them that they wanted, people say, they didn't get something they wanted, a job, or they made dua and they didn't get something, or they tried to get married and it didn't happen. For the believer, عَجَبًا لِأَمْرٍ الْمُؤْمِنِ فَإِنَّ أَمْرُهُ لَهُ كُلُّهُ خَيْرٌ. It's good. It's not bad. Because they trust that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only does what is beneficial for them. It's not wajibun alayhi, right? It's not an obligation, but كَتَبَ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ الرَّحْمَةِ. He has decreed for himself mercy, so he's merciful to his servants. So, and then he says, and it's from a hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ said, if all of creation got together to try to harm you, and Allah did not decree that you could be harmed, they couldn't harm you, and vice versa. If they tried to get together to help you, to protect something that was meant to afflict you, they couldn't protect you from being afflicted by it. Like the story of the meeting in Samara. You know that story? About the man who he was in Khurasan, and he saw the angel of death, and the angel of death looked at him like he was surprised. He got on the fastest horse and he just rode, and he kept riding till he got to Samara. He's alhamdulillah. And then the angel of death came and he saw him. He said, when I saw you in Khurasan, I was wondering what you were doing there because we had a meeting here tonight in Samara. So you can't get away, you can't flee from your destiny. You only flee to your destiny. When Sayyidina Umar left an area that had plague, they said, أَتَفِرُّ مِنْ قَدْرِ اللَّهِ قَالَ نَفِرُّ مِنْ قَدْرِ اللَّهِ إِلَىٰ قَدْرِ اللَّهِ. We're fleeing from the qadr of Allah to the qadr of Allah. So you can only go to where you're meant to go. وعلى العبد أن يعلم أن الله قد سبق علمه في كل شيء من خلقه فقدر ذلك تقديرا محكما مبرما ليس فيه ناقض ولا معقب ولا مزير ولا مغير ولا محول ولا ناقص ولا زائد من خلقه في سماواته وأرضه. A servant of God is obliged to know that Allah's omniscience, His all-knowingness, that He knows everything, preceded everything in His creation. Al-ilm al-qudra. Everything comes from Allah's knowledge and His power that He brings into the world. Wal-irada, that He wanted it to come into existence. He then measured everything out exactly and decisively. So everything is bitaqdeer. It's measured out. There's nothing in the world that is not measured exactly as it is meant to be. Nothing, no matter what it is in your life. Everything is measured out. There is none among His creatures, either in the heavens or the earth, who can nullify, overrule, remove, change, detract from, or add to His decree. all of the then وَذَلِكَ مِنْ عَقْدِ الْإِيمَانِ, this, all of the aforementioned is part of the doctrine of faith. This is عقد الإيمان. It's what you're bound to in faith. This is our aqidah. وَأُصُولِ الْمَعْرِفَةِ, and this is the foundation and the principles of knowledge, of ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لِتَعْرِفُونِ مَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I created humans and jinn and humans. لِيَعْبُدُونَ لِيَعْرِفُونَ. This is the ma'rifah that Allah created us to know. This is the theory of it. The practice of it is to live with these principles until they become truly part of our understanding. We live these truths. So when things happen to us, we know they happen for a reason. But this is the theory. The practice is how you live your life according to these principles with faith. وَالْاعْتِرَافِ بِتَوْحِيدِ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى وَرُبُوبِيَّتِهِ. And this is also because there's a riwayah وَبِرُبُوبِيَّتِهِ with the ba mentioned a second time. So that is the assent of His unity, al-i'tiraf, the assent of His unity and sovereignty as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as our God, the sublime and the exalted. كما قال تعالى في كتابه العزيز, as He said in His book, وَخَلَقَ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ فَقَدَّرَهُ تَقْدِيرًا. He created everything and then measured it as it was meant to be measured in its specification. That's why everything in you can be measured. I mean, now this is, سَنُرِيهِمْ آيَاتِنَا فِي الْآفَاقِ وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ, in themselves, حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَهُمْ أَنَّهُ الْحَقُّ. Now we're understanding that everything is already, it's been measured. So the size of your nose was measured. It was in your genetic makeup. It will go to where it was meant to go. Your hands, the size of your hands, will go to where they were meant to go. This is all now being unveiled to man, these meanings. So what these people were talking about centuries ago, this is being unveiled to human beings now with the Genome Project and understanding that we are completely measured out. And there's an average even. They did a study of faces, a computer study of faces. And they would show people faces and they would ask them to identify the most beautiful faces, the things people were most attracted to. And obviously there's a cultural element to these. But what they found when they did computer analyses of faces that were picked out, they were the most average faces. But it was the most average eyes, with the most average nose, with the most average cheeks, with the most average chin. That's what people found beautiful, was the totality, and it's about symmetry and balance. So all of that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has measured out, everything, your body. And that doesn't mean that as your waistline expands, that, right? So you can, there's certain things, you can't grow. I mean, I grew an inch in my 20s. Which is very unusual, but it's you get limited. Maybe they have things they give children now, but then that's still from the qadr of Allah. تَدَاوُوا فَإِنَّ دَوَامًا قَدْرِ اللَّهِ. Use medicine, but know that medicine is also part of the qadr. So even anything that you do to augment yourself, to enhance yourself, that's also part of the qadr. وقال تعالى وكان أمر الله قدرا مقدورا. And the command of Allah is an ordained decree. So He says فويل لمن صار لله تعالى في القدر خصيما وأحضر للنظر فيه قلبا سقيما ولقد التمس بوهمه في محض الغيب سرا كتيما وعاد بما قال فيه أفاكا أثيما. So woe to whomever, on account of the decree, becomes antagonistic with God. So they become like, they get angry. They ask why things happen. Why is God doing this to me? It's not fair. Why? Then now you're becoming antagonistic to the one who can do whatever he wants, and you can't say to him why. In the same way that if you know, I mentioned this, that if you own something, and you know, al-malik lahu haqq tasarruf fi mulkihi. Somebody that possesses something has the right to do what he wants in his possession. So I cannot, if you see me take a glass and I break the glass and throw it away, you can look at that and wonder, but you can't say why in i'tirad. You can ask a question. Istifham. You know, that's the angels. They asked istifhaman, la i'tiradan. They asked to understand. So you can ask to understand, but you can't ask to object. Why did you break that? It was a perfectly good glass. Now I could know that that glass was actually chipped and somebody could hurt themselves. You didn't know that. But it was my glass. I can do what I want. So you can't do that. Everything, مَا كَانَ اللَّهُ ظَلَّامًا لِلْعَبِيدِ. God does not oppress His servant. Why? Because they're His. It's His possession. You cannot oppress something that belongs to you. It's not possible. So وَأَحْضَرَ لِلنَّذِرِ فِي قَلْبٍ سَقِيمًا. So he looks at these things with a sick heart. When you're sick, right? تُنْكِرَ الْعَيْنُ ضَوْءَ الشَّمْسِ مِنْ رَمَدِ. Imam al-Busiri says that the eye rejects the light of the sun when it has ophthalmia. It's an eye disease. There are people that go out and they can't look. They have to put sunglasses on because they can't look. But it's because their eye is sensitive. There's nothing wrong with the light outside, because people that are normal, that have normal eyesight, they go out and they don't have that same problem. It's not painful to look. وَيُنْكِرُ الْفَمُ طَعْمَ الْمَاءِ مِنْ سَقَمِ. And an unhealthy person will drink water and they won't like the taste of it. The problem's not in the water. The problem's in the one tasting the water. And this is the same way with what happens in the world. The problem is not what happens in the world. The problem is what happens to the one who's in the world in his experiences. مَنْ وَجَدَ خَيْرًا فَلْيَحْمَدِ اللَّهِ. If you find good, thank God. وَمَنْ وَجَدَ غَيْرَ ذَلِكَ فَلَا يُلُومَنَّ إِلَّا نَفْسَهُ. Let him blame only himself. Because it's your looking that is the problem. It's not the thing itself. And that doesn't negate wrongs in the world and things. No, things are wrong and you have to change things. But people, you know, there's a poem I was thinking about today, Robert Frost. You know, because this is one of the things people ask, you know, why is this? Robert Frost wrote a poem. He said, you know, I turned to talk to God. I turned to talk to God about the world's despair. Right? I turned to talk to God about the world's despair. And to make bad matters worse, I found God wasn't there. Right? God turned to talk to me. Don't anybody laugh. And God found I wasn't there. At least not more than half. And that's a beautiful statement. Because people ask, you know, how can God let this happen? And one of the most interesting things about atheists is some atheists deny God because their opinion of God is so high. Because if you ask them, why don't you believe in God? How could I believe in a God that would allow a world like this? With all this suffering. It's husn al-dhan. You know, their good opinion of God has led them to believe. But see, the real question is that where are the people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made with this free will, with this incredible knowledge, with this technology, with all these abilities? How do they let these things happen? Not how does God let these things happen. How do people here let that? Because God has every right to ask us the same question. He has every right to ask us the same question. How can you rape a little child? I gave you reasoning. I gave you power. I gave you knowledge. I gave you will. I gave you the ability to speak. I give you the ability to control your appetites, and you do this? So that's the real question. It's not where is God? It's where are the people that God created to be stewards? That's the real question. And that's the problem with modern man, is that he's asking where God is, but God's asking where we are. People say God's not listening to us. We're not listening to God, people. He's told us what to do. He sent revelations. لا تفسدوا في الأرض. Don't sow corruption in the earth. بعد إصلاحها. I made this world perfect for you. I gave you perfect ميزان. ووضع الميزان ألا تطغوا في الميزان. I put a perfect balance in the world, and in order that you not transgress the balance. I left it perfect for you. Now we know all the ecology. We have all these scientists that tell us how everything's perfectly balanced. If you kill all the spiders with your insecticides, then the flies take over. Because the spiders are controlling all the flies. When I was in Mauritania, I was in the middle of the desert, and I met a man from England. It was an amazing thing. We arrived in, this was the middle of nowhere. We were on the way to the Marab al-Hajj, which to them it's somewhere. But for us, it's nowhere. And we arrived, and I was wearing a turban, and I had a dara'an. And we came down. I was with Mauritanians. And he was in a tent with net. This is a true story. He had a little table up, and he had a tea set with like china. I mean, this is out in the middle of the desert. And he was an Englishman having his tea. And he had some Mauritanian servants, there. So I came in and I said, I didn't say, what ho? What ho, old bean? I said, how you doing? He said, oh, come join me. So I came in, I sat down. He said, so are you studying the natives? This is a true story. I couldn't make this stuff up. And I said to him, actually, I came to study you. He was like, I said, what are you doing out here? He said, I'm studying the lizards. And I said, really, what? And then he explained that he was on a UN project because the insecticides in Senegal that were being used were destroying the lizard population. And that was affecting the ecology because the lizards eat a lot of the insects. So it was creating imbalances, and they were measuring to see how far it had gone. It's an amazing thing that these people do. But the point is that everything is imbalanced. We can measure these things because there's supposed to be so many lizards per square, and they can measure these things now. How many there are supposed to be. And if those start diminishing, then the other things that are kept in check by them get out of control. Because everything is serving a purpose. Everything. Everything. So it's this is the real question. Allah has every right to ask us. لا يسأل عما يفعل. He's not asked about what he did. وهم يسألون. But they're going to be asked. And that's the real question. Is not how does God let these things happen, it's how do we, with all of our ability, the intellect, the will, we go to the moon. We have satellites around this planet. We can take a phone and call right now anywhere in the world, and somebody who has that cell phone can pick it up, and we can talk and communicate instantaneously. And yet there's people starving. There are people right now dying of hunger. It's insane. Man is completely stark raving mad. It's a mad situation. So that's the real question. Don't look with a morbid heart, because the people that look and question God, their hearts are diseased. The people, and there's a famous story of Zaytuna and Hamza Yusuf. When there was a plague in Egypt, and he was wondering because he saw children. Because in وَقَوْلُهُمْ إِنَّ الصَّلَحَ وَاجِبُ عَلَيْهِ زُورٌ مَا عَلَيْهِ وَاجِبُ أَلَمْ يَرَوْا إِلَامُهُ الْأَطْفَالَ وَشِبْهَهُ فَحَذَرَ الْمِحَالَ. Imam al-Laqani says that those who say that Allah has to do only what is good for His creation are liars. Haven't you seen how children suffer in the world? So children do suffer. Even children suffer physical evils, not moral evils, like rape or incest or pedophilia. Those are moral evils. But they suffer physical evils, like the shar of cancer. But one of the things you'll note about children, and anybody who's a physician, right? Here, anybody who's a physician, if you go to a children's cancer ward, you will never find children asking why this is happening to them. Wallahi, they won't do it. An 8-year-old child that gets afflicted with some disease, the parents will be saying, why is this happening to my child? The child won't ask why. Because they're in submission. To them, it's not a question. And that insight, I got that insight from a Frenchman who wrote a book called And Then There Was Light. A very interesting man. He worked for the French resistance during the Nazi occupation of France. He was blinded when he was a child. But in the first chapter of his book, he said he always was grateful to God that God took away his sight when he was a child. Because he said children never question God's judgments. It's only adults that do those. It's only the adults that question. Because children are in that fitra state. So that's what he's saying, that if you look with a diseased heart, and then you look, because in his delusion, right? In his waham, in his delusion, he seeks a secret concealed in the unseen, only to end up in whatever he says concerning a wicked forger of lies. He ends up like, people like Dawkins, and in our time, Hitchens, Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, George Carlin, Bill Maher, people that make fun of religion, people that make fun of God, and it's a proof of God's hilm, that He is Halim, that He allows these people to eat, to drink, He keeps their temperature at 98.6 like everybody else. It's amazing rahmah. The rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But those are what these people do. They because their hearts are diseased, that's all they can see is disease. So he's saying waylun, and waylun is the way the Arabs warn. It's also said that it's a tree in hell. Waylun, wayl. Wayhun is when you have compassion. And then he says, وَالْعَرْشُ وَالْكُرْسِيُّ حَقٌّ. The arsh, and I prefer not to translate these things because they're really mutashabihat. The most immense of God's creation. In Arabic, arsh generally is a throne. Some say it's the opposite, that the kursi is the throne and the arsh is the footstool. But arsh and kursi are literally they're the throne and the footstool of a king. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses them in the Quran. وَالْعَرْشُ وَالْكُرْسِيُّ حَقٌّ. And then he says, but in order to make you again understand it, وَهُوَ مُسْتَغْنٍ عَنِ الْعَرْشِ. Allah has no need of the arsh. In other words, he's not in any state where he's mahmul. Like every human being needs space. We can't exist without space. We need what's called a hayyiz. نَتَحَيِّزُ بِمَحَلٍ. Right? I need something to carry me. Like all of us right now, by gravity, we're being held to the earth. But without the earth, we wouldn't have anything to hold us up. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has no hayyiz. لَا يَتَحَيِّزُ. He has no takhsis, there's no mukhassis lahu. There's nothing that is giving him any of these things. So that's what he means, that even though he described his arsh, ar-Rahman ala al-arsh istawa, he described that in the Quran, what he's saying is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has no need of these things. العرش وما دونه, anything beneath the arsh, محيط بكل شيء وفوقه. He encompasses all things. Ihata is to encompass something. So he's telling you now, when we use the term fawqa, that God is over, it does not mean over in a literal way, right? Because he says, la jihad lahu. We read that earlier. There's no jihad. He's not in the 6 directions. So that's why I translated fawqa here, transcends everything, that he's transcendent, beyond. That's what it means, not literally to be taken literally. محيط بكل شيء وفوقه وقد أعجز عن الإحاطة خلقه. And he has incapacitated, made his creation incapable of understanding him, of encompassing the meaning of God. العجز عن إدراكه إدراكه والخوض في كنه الإله إشراكه. That the inability to comprehend God is our comprehension of it, and to delve into the essential nature of God will lead to shirk. You'll end up with anthropomorphism, you'll end up falling into types of shirk. وَنَقُولُ إِنَّ اللَّهَ اتَّخَذَ إِبْرَاهِيمَ خَلِيلًا وَكَلَّمَ مُوسَى تَكْلِيمًا إِيمَانًا وَتَصْدِيقًا وَتَسْلِيمًا. With faith, conviction, and resignation, we assert that Allah befriended Ibrahim alayhi salam and addressed Musa. So the prophets, there are prophets that Allah has given them certain ulul azmi, they have certain status with God. All the prophets are exalted with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Prophet said, لا تفضلوا بين الأنبياء. Don't say one is better than the other in their nubuwah. Like iman is the same. It's don't believers are believers, but some believers are higher than other believers. So it's just like humans, we say all men are created equal. Nasu sawasiya. Everybody's equal, but not everybody has the same functions. They don't have the same. Some people are more productive than others. Some people are beneficial. Some people are harmful. But humans in their humanness are equal. The prophets are equal in their nubuwah. But some prophets have higher and more important roles than other prophets. And so Musa alayhi salam, Allah spoke to him. Allah took ittakhada Ibrahim khalila. He took him as a friend. But once the Prophet heard the Sahaba talking about this, and he came in, he said, I heard what you were saying. Isa is Ruh Allah, Musa is Kareem Allah, Ibrahim is Khalil Allah. He said, Wallahi, ana Habibullah wa la fakhra. I am the beloved of God, and I'm not boasting. I'm not boasting. So his maqam is the maqam of mahabba. So, and then he says, وَنُؤْمِنُ بِالْمَلَائِكَةِ وَالنَّبِيِّينَ وَالْكُتُبِ الْمُنَزِّلَةِ عَلَى الْمُرْسَلِينَ وَنَشْهَدُ أَنَّهُمْ كَانُوا عَلَى الْحَقِّ الْمُبِينَ. So he says that we believe in the angels. The angels there's different types of angels, but essentially the angels are creatures of light. يَفَعَلُونَ مَا يُؤْمَرُونَ. They do what they're told. They don't have free will in the same way that humans beings. They can take the form. If they do take the form of people, if they take a form, they take the form of men. Even though the Christian tradition is filled with female angels. So the angels, there are the muqarrabun, right? The angels that are in direct proximity in the mala. There's the hafadha. There's the angels the scriveners that write. Imam Asawi in the Sharh of the Jawhara says that every human has actually 10 angels they have guardian angels that are actually protecting them. The angels are real. The Prophet ﷺ reminded us to be aware of the angels, to be aware of angelic presence. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't need angels, but His creation is a creation of asbab, and so He uses the angels as a means. Allah can record everything without the means of angels, but He created angels, and we believe in them. We believe that The hadiths also indicate that they can take human forms and test people, like the hadith in Sahih Muslim of the three men, the Aqra and the Abras and the A'ma. The angels came to them in the form of the same type of people. So, and there's other indications of that. Just like Abu Huraira, Iblis came to Abu Huraira and tried to trick him when he was stealing from the Bayt al-Mal. He was guarding the Bayt al-Mal. So that's possible. And I mean, even there's a khilaf about that, but there's hadiths that indicate some of the Sahaba did see angels. And we know that they did see Jibreel alayhi salam when he came, because he said in the hadith Jibreel, which is one of the most famous hadiths in all the hadith tradition, that he said, he asked Umar, Atadri man as-sa'il ya Umar, do you know who that is? Hada Jibreel atakum liyu'allimukum dinukum. This was Jibreel, he came to, and they said, that the man came and appeared in front of them, asnada rukbatayhi ila rukbatayhi, put his knee up to the Prophet's knee, wa wada'a yadayhi ala fakhidayhi. Some say he put his knees on Jibreel's thighs, and there's an opinion that he actually put him on the Prophet's thighs, but putting it like a student, and then he asked him, and then he answered him. So that indicates very clearly that the angels took form. There were angels at Badr, as one of the khasa'is of the Prophet ﷺ. There were angels at Badr. So we believe in them. And then the prophets, the Nabi and the Rasul, in the gloss that I have for this, the scholars differ over the distinctions between a prophet, Nabi, and messenger, Rasul. The majority of Sunni scholars, however, agree that a prophet receives revelation without a book, or receives revelation for himself without the command to convey it to others, whereas a messenger is given revelation and commanded to communicate it to others. In regards to prophecy, Ibn Furak, who's one of the great scholars of Islam, says, prophecy is taken from the word naba, which means informing, imbat. That's why the Arabs call like the news now, wakalat al-anba, like a news agency. So they give news in a specific manner. In this case, it means from God. A prophet informs what Allah has revealed to him. However, there's another possible derivation of the word. If we remove the letter Hamza, then it might be derived from nabwa, which means elevation in the earth. For instance, the Arabs say, naba jambi an al-majda, like I rose from the bed. So this second derivation indicates the exalted status achieved by man-made ambassadors between God and humanity. Imam al-Maqari says in Illuminating the Dark Night, the messenger is a human being who God beyond human thought reveals to, then says to him, convey this law to those you are sent to, those who are called to follow them. Imam al-Jurjani in the Ta'rifat says the difference is a prophet is one who an angel reveals something to him, or he is inspired with revelation in his heart, or revelation comes through a true dream. A messenger is a higher station because he is granted specific revelation, which is above prophetic revelation. A messenger's revelation is mediated by Jibreel alayhi salam with a book from God. And then Imam Tahanawi says in the difference, a message, risala, is used to mean a sacred law, sharia, and a messenger is a man sent with that law, whether he's commanded to convey it or not. It is the same as nubuwwah. However, a message, a risala, can refer more specifically to the conveyance or to revelation received through Jibreel alayhi salam, or to a specific book or a new sacred law, or as an indication that the messenger is not commanded to follow. So every messenger in any case is a prophet. The difference of opinion is in the reverse. Is every prophet a messenger? All right, and some even say they're synonymous. So the dominant opinion is no, that the number of prophets in all the prophetic traditions that tell us about the numbers of prophets are weak. So there's nothing fixed. In the Sahih of Ibn Hibban, there's a hadith without a break in the chain that says it's 124,000 prophets, and the messengers are 313. In another chain, the messengers are numbered 314, and it said 315. Sa'aduddin Taftazani said in his commentary on the Aqaid, it's related that their number is 224,000. So these are khilafat. However, the safer position is not to define a specific number when mentioning them. The Quran says some of them we told their stories and others we haven't told you. So moreover, it's uncertain whether the number is too large. This is Sidi Mayyara. Thus including some who are not from them, or too small. So Muslims, we have to believe in all the messengers, but the ones that are, the 25 that are specifically mentioned in the Quran, which are mentioned in Surah Al-An'am, which is the 6th, in 83 and 86, all of them are mentioned in that surah except for 7. So out of the 25, 18 are mentioned there. So if you look at them, in that surah, in that verse, they're mentioned Ishaq, Yaqub, Nuh, Dawood, Sulaiman, Ayub, Yusuf, Musa, Harun, Zakaria, Yahya, Isa, Ilyas, Ismail, Al-Yasa', Yunus, Lut. So he mentions all 18 of those, and then added to those are Adam alayhi salam, Shu'aib, Salih, Hud, Idris, Dhul Kifli, which is Ezekiel, and then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So those are the 25 that are agreed upon that everybody has to believe in. All right. Now, there's a difference of opinion about Luqman. Some of them say it's Luqman. Some say Luqman is Aesop, like Aesop's fables. Some say Luqman was a Nubian. Some say he was Ethiopian. There's khilafat about Luqman, and some say he was a prophet. Others say he was Wa'il. Some say he was a slave. So those are different. Also about Al-Khadr. There's a difference about Al-Khadr. There's even a difference about Al-Khadr. The Jews believe that Elijah, right, Elias, is still walking the earth. And there are some Muslims that believe that Al-Khadr is one of those who drank from the fountain of youth, which is where you get the stories of the fountain of youth. Ponce de Leon, you know, the Spanish conquistador that came to the United States, he was looking for the fountain of youth, because that was a Muslim story that's related in the Muslim books, the Ayn al-Haya. So anyway, that was an opinion. There's certainly a lot of people who have claimed to have met with Al-Khadr, you know, many Abu Madian al-Ghawth, many people. Wallahu alam, you know. So a lot of these people are righteous people. When I asked Murabit al-Hajj about these things, he said these are things that a lot of the salihun athbat, you know, athbat al-salihun هذه الأشياء قال لا نحب أن ننكر ما أثبته الصالحون. We don't like to deny the things that the righteous people say, you know. But again, these aren't issues of aqidah, and that's the important thing. Muslims should never go to blows over these types of things. They're extraneous things to what's essential to the religion. They're incidental, but they're mentioned, and there's a lot of stories about them. So, and then also there's a difference of opinion about Maryam, Asiya, Hawa, and Musa. The vast majority of scholars believe only men held the rank of prophet. The Quran states that we have not sent messengers before you other than men whom we inspired, right? So it mentions the rijal. And then فَسَرُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Several authoritative scholars, however, are of the opinion that women were granted the rank of prophet. A prophetic tradition narrated by Imam al-Bukhari in the chapter on Nubuwah. So in Bab al-Nubuwah, he relates a hadith about the kummal, the people that have been perfected. The Prophet ﷺ said many men have been perfected, but only Maryam and Asiya amongst the women. So that would indicate where Imam al-Bukhari put that he would consider Asiya and Maryam to be from amongst those. And then Ibn Hajar, in his commentary on al-Bukhari, writes, those who consider Maryam to be a prophet use the words of God, and we chose you over all the women of all the worlds. This position is strengthened in what is mentioned about her in the chapter of the Quran entitled Maryam, because the angel speaks to her, gives her a message from God. I mean, that's a pretty strong argument for Nubuwah. That she is called Siddiqa does not negate that, because Yusuf is also called Siddiq. The Prophet Yusuf ﷺ is called Siddiq. And there exist narrations, this is Ibn Hajar speaking, that Imam al-Ash'ari said that there were female prophets. Ibn Hazm insists that there were. So Ibn Hazm al-Ahali, that there were 6. Hawa, Sarah, Hajar, Musa, Asya, and Maryam. Imam al-Qurtubi excludes Sarah and Hajar. So Imam al-Qurtubi also considered there to be women prophets. Suhaili transmits a similar position at the end of Ar-Rawd, saying it's the opinion of most of the jurists. Imam al-Qurtubi says the soundest opinion is that Maryam was a prophet. So that's Imam al-Qurtubi, Sahib al-Ahkam. As a strong, he's one of the great scholars of Islam. Qadi Iyad, however, states the majority of scholars are opposed to this position. Imam an-Nawawi also mentions that Imam al-Haramain claimed consensus that Maryam was not a prophet, but that's obviously not, it's not, because it's not, there's no consensus. That was his opinion. And he quotes as a source on the commentary of Muhaddab by a group of scholars, a transmission that exists from Hassan al-Basri that states there aren't any prophets among women or jinn. Imam Subki contends that this is a matter in which difference of opinion abounds and nothing is absolutely established with me. So Imam Subki said, هذه مسألة فيها خلاف كثير. And he says, nothing, لم يثبت عندي شيء. There's nothing that I can fix upon and say this is the definitive position. So Allahu A'lam. And then just to mention here that the Maturidi and the Ash'ari scholars have 4 wajibat about prophets. So this is important to note. Sidq, Amana, Tabligh, and Fatana. These are the 4. They have to be truthful. They can't lie in anything. So Ibrahim alayhi salam, when the Prophet mentioned he had 3 lies, they're not. It's a type of ihala. It's a way of what the Arabs call tawriya. It's where you say something and you mean something else. Like the man who asked the Prophet, he wanted to kill the Prophet, and he said, "Which tribe are you from?" And he said, "Ana min al-ma'." I'm from water. And so the Bedouin thought that was some tribe he'd never heard of. So maybe he asks you what tribe you're from, you can say, Min Beni Ma. So that's not a lie. The Prophet doesn't lie. That's a way of, you have tasrih and you have ta'rid. It's a way of just prevaricating is what we call it in English, prevaricating. The English call it waffling. It's like where you say something and it can mean more than one thing. So it's a way of not having to state clearly. And then trustworthiness, amana, which means they're ameen in everything. The Prophet was al-amin before Islam. Sagaciousness, which is fatana, they have exceptional intelligence. So they're exceptional in their intelligence. And then tabligh, they don't hide anything. La yaktumu shay. They don't hide or conceal anything of their message. And then as for other dispensations and traditions, Muslims believe in the prophets of Bani Israel, although the Bible mentions several that are not mentioned in the Quran. For instance, Daniel, which some of the Jews say was a righteous man, others say was a prophet, but the book of Daniel is clearly a book of prophecy. Daniel is, Ibn Kathir considered him a prophet, puts him in Qasas al-Anbiya. I have a son named Daniel. So we were in Mecca and somebody said, "What's your name?" It was a lady. He said, "Daniel." She said, "That's not a Muslim name." So I went up to her, when you tell my son, she said, "That's not a Muslim name." I said, "Have you ever read Ibn Kathir, Qasas al-Anbiya?" She said, "No." That's like Imam al-Zuhri. Imam al-Zuhri, he once saw a man do taslima wahida. This is a Maliki position, taslima wahida. There's a weak hadith that Aisha relates in Tirmidhi. And he saw him do that in Medina. Imam Zuhri is one of the biggest of al-Bukhari, Rijal al-Bukhari, one of the greatest muhaddithin in the history of Islam. So he saw a man do taslimatain in Medina. Assalamu alaikum, assalamu alaikum, to get out of the prayer. So he said to the man, "Aina laka hadihi taslima?" where'd you get that taslima? And the man told him, عن فلان عن ابن مسعود أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم خرج من صلاته بتسليمتين. So he told him this hadith. I heard it from my teacher who heard it from Ibn Mas'ud, that the Prophet, when he left Salat, he left with 2 taslima. So Zuhri radiallahu anhu said, I've never heard that hadith. The man said, أتحيط بحديث رسول الله كله? You know all the hadiths of the Prophet? He said, لا. He said, أتعلم ثلثي? You know 2/3 of the hadith? He said, لا. He said, تعلم نصف الحديث? He said, نعم. Do you know half of all the hadiths? He said, yes. He said, طيب اجعله في النصف الذي لا تعلم. Put it in the half you don't know. So, and then also, in terms of Buddhism and Hinduism, Allahu A'lam, the Hinduism is not like many Muslims think that it's actually a polytheistic religion. Hinduism, if you study Hinduism, is a Unitarian tradition. They don't believe in gods. But the Brahman, which is the highest caste in Hinduism, they're like the ulama, they're like the rabbis of the Hindus. They believe that common people are too ignorant to understand Tawheed. And so they give them images to fix on as ways of, helping them in their... So obviously it's a corrupted form, or who knows what. I mean, these are ancient traditions, but Hinduism, they have books, the Vedas. The Vedas are very interesting books. They have books. It's a very profound spiritual tradition, Hinduism. I mean, I have antibodies against Hinduism. It's one of the, when I studied comparative religions, because I have my degree in the university, I always had a hard time with Hinduism, because there are a lot of things in it that bothered me. But, a few years ago, I did a more serious study of it, and I really kind of lightened up on Hinduism. But generally, Muslims have never really liked Hinduism, just as there's a lot of things that really bother Muslims about Hinduism, and there's a lot of things that are troublesome about it. But whether or not it's, it would seem to me, and Al-Baruni was of that opinion. He actually wrote a book on the Hindus. So some of the early scholars did think that it was from some prophetic tradition. Buddhism, one would argue that it's very hard to believe that so many multitudes of people could be following false prophets in that way, or complete Dajjalic phenomenon. So Allahu A'lam. And Buddhism is another very problematic religion, because Buddhists, although they do believe in a transcendent reality, they don't believe in a creator God like we do. They don't believe in Allah's rububiyyah and things. But they definitely, Pure Land Buddhism especially, has very, very similar aspects to Islam. And many of the Buddhists became Muslim. Afghanistan was one of the great Buddhist centers of the world. Afghanistan was much of the Buddhist learning was in Afghanistan, and they became great scholars of Islam. The Barmek were actually Buddhist shrine keepers. So the Baramika, who are considered a family, are not actually a family. They were a clan of shrine keepers, Buddhist shrine keepers. And the Buddhists also brought interesting things into Islam. They brought certain tools, intellectual tools, into the Islamic tradition. One of them was a type of logic that is not Hellenistic, which you find in both Maturidi, and Imam al-Maturidi was from a very strong Buddhist area. Rumi's Masnawi is filled with Buddhist stories that have been Islamicized. So a lot of the wisdoms that you find in Rumi, they're actually coming right out of Buddhist tradition. Well, where was he from? Balkh. I mean, he was from a very strong Buddhist center. So it's not surprising that a lot of these stories would have been turned, like you can take lots of jokes. I'll give you an example about the man whose dog died, and he was very distressed. He was a Maliki, because Malikis can have dogs. And he went to the Imam and he said, listen, my dog died, and would you do janazah over my dog? And he said, He said, A'udhu billah. First of all, a dog is najis. You shouldn't even have a dog. And I'm not going to do janazah over your dog. So he said, I really love this dog, and I'm distressed about the dog. And he said, I'll tell you what. There's a Shia mosque down the road, and you go down there, they might do the janazah on the dog. So he says to the man, he said, I want to give the imam who did it an honorarium. Do you think $1,000 is too little? So the imam says, that dog, was he Sunni or Shi'i? Now, my point of telling that joke is that joke was told to me by my father with a Protestant and a Catholic. Okay, so you can take stories and you can easily adopt them to other traditions. And so a lot of that was done and that's what we find. A lot of the stories that are related in the books actually came from other traditions. That's true. But what did the Prophet ﷺ say? Al-hikmatu dalatul mu'min. Wisdom is the lost property of a believer. So it wasn't a bad thing they were doing. There was wisdom in those things, and there's an immense amount of wisdom in these other traditions. So to use that wisdom is beneficial. So about that, I mean, if people ask you about that, we have tawaqquf. Allahu a'lam. You don't want to deny these things, because if they were prophetic traditions, if Krishna was a prophet, if Buddha was a prophet, and you say, no, he wasn't a prophet, you're denying a prophet of God. And we know that traditions get corrupted. So the best thing about those type things is Allahu a'lam, is tawaqquf. That's a better position than to just reject them flat out. All right. So, alhamdulillah. So this gets much easier now. I think we got through the. Alhamdulillah. All right. Few questions. Can one draw a parallel between Qadrullah and Laylat al-Qadr? Well, Laylat al-Qadr is, I talked yesterday about al-Qadr al-Mu'allaq and the Qadr al-Mubram. The Qadr al-Mu'allaq is the Qadr that hasn't come down, and that, in our belief, dua can actually benefit you from things that were going to happen, and you made dua, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala suspended that. So Laylat al-Qadr is the night of power. It's the night when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed. The Quran came down to the Sama'ud Dunya in its entirety, and then over 23 years it was given to the Prophet ﷺ. So that's the night that it came down. Nusfu Sha'ban is also the night of the Qadr al-Mu'allaq, according to some traditions. Imam al-Awza'i was of that opinion. I mentioned that last night, that Imam Malik did not. But just to let you know here, the Thursday night, which is the 15th of the month of Sha'ban, is, some say it's, call it the most powerful night of the year after Laylat al-Qadr. And so it's called Laylat al-Bara'a, which is the night of salvation, the night of freedom from torment and calamities. From the time the sun goes down, the heavens are open, no prayer is rejected. It's been said that Allah promised to fulfill every legitimate desire put forward to Him on the blessed day. The 15th of Sha'ban is sustenance, welfare, life and death are given to the angels to disperse upon the earth. This is the very night the angel of death records all that shall pass away that year. So traditionally, Muslims gathered all over, and they did prayers. For instance, in Hadramaut, one of the practices is after Maghrib or Isha prayer, they recite Yasin 3 times, and they have the intention of different things each time. So the first Yasin, because Yasin lima quriha la, Yasin, you get, and these are weak hadiths, but I did something called the Content of Character, which is a small book on prophetic invocation, prophetic akhlaq. hadith from the Prophet. And there were some weak hadiths. It was a collection by Ali Mazru'i's father, Amin al-Mazru'i. And I liked the collection, so I translated it. And to be trustworthy, all the hadiths that he put in, I put in there. And some of them were weak. But there's an attack on weak hadiths in our time. A weak hadith is anywhere from a B- to a D-. All right? A Hasan hadith is a B to an A-. And then a Sahih hadith, I'm just using a language you can understand. An A- is like a Sahih hadith is from an A to an A+ to 100%. Mutawatir is 100%. Al-Bukhari is like 98%, 99%. Muslim and Bukhari, 99%. Sahih Muslim, 97%. So a weak hadith is not thrown out. Just like a professor doesn't throw out a paper that gets a D-. It didn't flunk. It passed. And so when the ulama say it's a weak hadith, it passed. In other words, it's something that cannot be proven to not have been said by the Prophet. The probability that he said it is far greater than the probability that he didn't say it. So it's called a hadith da'if because the margin of error is greater than in a hasan or a sahih. So how did the ulama deal with that? The ulama dealt with it by saying that for fada'il al-amal, those actions that are virtuous, you could use a weak hadith if it was a virtuous action and it didn't relate to a hukm. In Aqidah, the opinion of the Ash'ari and the Maturidi is the hadith has to be mutawatir. That you can't. That's why a hadith like the Nur al-Muhammadi, which is a ahad hadith, is not used in Aqidah. Or the hadith that tu'arad alayya a'malukum, or a'malu ummati in al-Bazar, which is a sahih hadith. So the ulama don't reject weak hadith. They don't. And so this argument against the weak hadith is a weak argument. And that is why Imam al-Awza'i, who's one of the great imams of the ummah, who was as learned as the 4 imams in fiqh and in the sciences of Islam, they said that he answered over 70,000 questions with Qala Allah or Qala Rasulullah. You know, I asked one of my Mauritanian teachers, how's that possible? He said, Kam min su'al yujabu bi innama al-amalu bin niyat. He said, how many questions are answered with innama al-amalu bin niyat? You know, so, but he was a master of dalil and hadith. He was of the opinion that Nisfu Sha'ban was ma'mul, that people should, ihya al-layl is a good night. Imam Malik karihahu, like Ibn al-Hajj said in al-Madkhal. The later Malikis tended to consider it an important night. I'm sure, I don't know, in Sudan, is Nisfu Sha'ban, some of them, and some don't. Yeah, so that's the way it is in Mauritania. Some of the ulama take it, the other ones don't. So it's one of those issues. I personally, like I said, you know, I was only, you know, recently that I did anything on Nisfu Sha'ban, but I personally benefited on Nisfu Sha'ban, personally. That was my personal experience. So, but in Tareem, they do, in the first Yasin, they make the intention of spending a long life in worship. In the second Yasin, with the intention of protection from calamities. And in the third Yasin, with the intention of being in need only of Allah and freed from the need of others. So getting your debts fulfilled, all those things. So that's a practice that the Hadarima do, the ulama do, the Ba'alawi. You know, again, it's based on the hadith of Yasin. It's you know, that Yasin is, you get the intention of what you read it for. So if you read it with a niyyah, then it has that blessing. I had something stolen, you know, from me years ago. It wasn't mine. It was actually this is a true story. You know, when you first become Muslim, it's very interesting, your hal. You know, it's a good hal to be in. Like Imam Zayd and I kind of lament those days because it's just an amazing hal. When people, like we have a guest here, Fred Wise. I don't think he's here tonight. Is Fred here? Yeah, but he's been here. People have been with him. You know, he's a brand new Muslim, and he's just like, you know, he's really in a nice state. But, you know, something got stolen. I was on a train, and this thing was a really expensive, and I put it on the cargo thing. It was a stupid thing to do. But like I said yesterday, you know, I do stupid things. So, but I put it on in the cargo compartment. So when I got to the place, this is in England, and I'd had such a hard time getting this thing. I was doing it for somebody else. So I get there and I go in and it's not there. I was just devastated because I had to go tell this person, and this thing was a really expensive item. So I had to go tell this person that it wasn't there. So there was a Nigerian man there, you know, and when I got to this place, I told him what happened. I was completely devastated. I really was in a state of shock. He said, read 41 Yassins. I guarantee you it'll come back. So I swear to God, I spent the whole night reading 41 Yassins. I really did. I just read 41 with total and utter belief in what he was telling me. The next morning, and wallahi, as Allah is my witness, the next morning I went to the train station. It was just there, right right on the corner, open. Anybody could have taken it. Wallahi. You know, so when you have that iman, even if it's like a bid'ah or if it's something, it's like Allah is so generous with sincerity, you know, if you really believe something. So now it's always better to do what the Prophet ﷺ did, no doubt. But Yasin is a great gift to this ummah from Allah. It's the heart of Quran, and Yasin has incredible efficaciousness. It really does. Mujarrab. You know, this is what the ulama in the books, they say, mujarrab. It's been tried and tested. So don't listen to people who say, bid'ah, weak hadith, you know. Trust me. Mujarrab. Alhamdulillah. Jazakumullah khairan. We are very honored to have Imam Majid coming up from Washington. He's one of the great blessings of our community in the U.S. And you know, may Allah give him good health and continue to bless him and his family. And Adam Center for people that are in this area, it's one of the great gifts of this area. You know, it's a beautiful masjid with a very good community, and largely due. I mean, he has his people around him, but it's always, the Mauritanians say, الرجل يبني الحلة والحلة لا تبني الرجل. You know, a man can build a city, but a city can't make a man. You know, so it's always good to have good people. Let me quickly, when talking about angels, you mentioned Iblis. I thought he was a spirit. The dominant opinion is that Iblis is a jinn. You know, there's a weaker opinion that he was a fallen angel, but then you fall into problems of you know, free will and so. And I heard Shaykh Muhammad al-Sabuni, the Mufassir, just adamant at just rejecting and completely attacking. But there, you know, there are opinions, and the ulama mentioned it. But I didn't mean to mention him as an angel. I didn't mean that. The protective angels are meant to make sure that nothing happens that's not supposed to happen. So if you're walking somewhere and there's something about to fall down, it's not meant to hit you. They might, you know, call your attention to something in some other place. So, I mean, I once fell asleep at the wheel when I was in high school, and I literally got yanked out of the sleep, and I was headed right for a telephone pole. And I just swerved. I almost crashed the car. But I don't, you know, I was yanked, like literally pulled up. So, you know, that's the role of the angels, is to make sure that nothing that's not meant to happen to you doesn't happen. But if it's not, then they leave you and they let it happen. Is concrete conviction of Allah's majesty and grace attained over time or an instant realization? Well, if you mean by concrete conviction iman is grows. We believe, you know, that you know, that iman it it grows with ta'at and it diminishes with ma'asiyah. So if you mean about that, I mean, that's something that should be in you. It's you either believe or you don't believe. If you have weak iman, then you can increase that iman by certain actions. But ma'rifah or realization can happen in an instant. So people can have realizations in their lives, just a sudden, what's in English called an epiphany, where you really realize something. You can realize, for instance, there are a lot of people who have never realized they're going to die. They haven't realized it. If you have realized it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you haven't realized it, you don't know what I'm talking about. But to become utterly and completely aware of your mortality in a way in which every cell of your body just knows that you're going to die. Many people don't have that experience until a certain point in their life. If you had it, you know exactly when you had it. And it's a very powerful experience. It's a life-altering experience. For me, it was in a near-death experience. A lot of people haven't had that experience. So that is a realization. That's a type of ma'rifah, to know that in a deep way. Because most of us, I used to think that people, the older they got, the more aware of death that they would get. And I totally am convinced now it's actually the opposite. The older you get, unless you're doing dhikr, أكثر من ذكر هذا اللذات, make remembrance of the destroyer of delights, death. But we get used to being here. Over time, even though your body's changing, you're getting older, we get used to being here. You wake up in the morning, the sun's up, you get your newspaper, you have your coffee, you've been doing it. The Arabs say, ما أشبه الليل بالبارحة. How similar today is to yesterday. So people get into that I'm not going anywhere. And unless you're doing practices to do that. So knowing the 25 prophets, could you please explain what you mean by knowing the 25 prophets? Some of them mean you actually have to memorize the names, which is the best thing to do. You should be able to recite the 25 prophets. Some of them say that it means that you just have to recognize them if you hear them. So somebody, you might not remember Dhul Kifli if somebody says, give me the prophets, and you start thinking about them and you get to maybe 15 or something. But if somebody says Dhul Kifli, yeah, he's a prophet. If somebody says, Ilyas, yes, he's a prophet. If somebody says Dawood, yes, he's a prophet. Sulaiman, yes. So who are the ones that are mentioned. And then the ones that there's difference of opinion about. So, okay, this is a question about the qadr. It's a good question. I thought I clarified it yesterday. But there is another section, 106, when I get to 106 on the istita'a, it deals with this question. So inshallah, I'll deal with that on Thursday night, bidnillah. All right? Jazakumullah khairan.